I'm going to hand over to our next presentation team. It's Dr. Ralph Bruckner. Hello, Ralph.
Hello, Max.
He's co-founder at Hecosol. And we've got Joachim Klaus, who is occupational safety engineer at Lufthansa. And gentlemen, you are going to be talking to us, as I mentioned at the outset, about hygiene and cleaning solutions that we can help us as an industry boost passenger confidence. So I believe, Joachim, you're going to lead on this one, and I'll hand the controls to you and look forward to the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Max. I would like to rush because we are on slot and a little bit late almost. Starting off our presentation about hygiene aspects and cleaning solutions to boost passenger confidence. I must say, since I'm an occupational safety engineer with Lufthansa, it's also crew confidence. I can tell you they are also very upset about all these situations. For example, it's nothing new to introduce passengers in using a mask. Well, today we are looking for certain other things like this because we are in a pandemic situation. When we talk about hygiene solutions, it could be, next slide please, it could be quite different because a lot of people talk about things they do not know much about, and I know what I say. Give you an overview, we're talking a little bit about disinfection procedures. We are talking about sorts of disinfections, and then we go over to cleaning, and we talk about basic hygiene aspects and how much clean and tidiness do we need. I would say, next slide please.
Yeah, Joachim, thank you. Before we talk about disinfection and cleaning, we should remind us why this is necessary. Of course, all of us are experts in hygiene since, would say, March 2020, because we were educated from governments and experts from the television and so on. And we know that we all carry a microbiome with us with more than 1 billion bacteria. But as well, we carry naturally 15 different types of viruses with us. And if you catch a wrong virus and get infected, you know what could turn out, as we saw in the last year. Well, as human beings, we love to touch surfaces. And it's clear that in confined spaces like in an aircraft, areas like the toilet flush button, the tray table, and the overhead bins are the surfaces that are mostly contaminated. Next slide, please.
Turning to the highest level of clean, would say this is, we are talking about disinfection. And the highest level talking about disinfection on board of an aircraft means this will be an official request by a certain public health office. For example, you arrive with your aircraft on an airport like in Frankfurt, let's say in the year 2003, Singapore Airlines with a B747, they carried a medical doctor who was suffering from SARS-1, you remember? And that was a thing where the offices, but also airlines and airports did not know how to handle, because there was no possibility to say, we know how to make an aircraft disinfection. How does it work? And that was quite interesting. That was the beginning for me to work together with all these official public health offices and ministries, but also in Germany, our Robert Koch Institute, our World Health Organization. There were a lot of people interested in that, and that led us into, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that in 2016, nearly 13 years later, we published an article concerning disinfection of aircraft. This is internationally published. You can Google it and you get it. With this article, you will also find a QR code, which is also shown on the slide. There you can get some 10, 11 pages of checklists how to perform an aircraft disinfection for the disinfector, for the public health office, for the maintenance, for the crew. Everything is described in that. And it was a long way to publish that. And the need came up when we suffered from Ebola in 2014 and 2015. So the interest were there to talk about something like a pandemic plan and things like that. And this was one of the procedures which we brought out to deal with all these things. With our pandemic situation at the moment, we were very happy in the beginning of the last year that we at least thought to be prepared. But of course, it came different. Next slide, please. The next slide. Yes, thank you. Here you can see a short cut from one of those checklists where for disinfection of aircraft products are shown which can be used, alcohol-based, organ peroxide-based, or formaldehyde-based products that can be used on an aircraft. And there was one very important nuance on this. It's not only you have to have a disinfection solution which works on the virus, bacteria, whatever you are going to kill, but you also have to keep an eye on something which is called aircraft component compatibility. So if you use certain acids on board of an aircraft, you can think about to buy a new one. So at least this also has to be considered, and that is a long way. In the mid here you can see Boeing D67127 or Airbus AHM 1415. Those are specifications which show how the material tests have to be made. That is a very important information whenever I use any products on board of an aircraft. Next slide, please. A funny thing that came up that was also an official request, but there was no need. That is, whenever we fly to China with our freighters or with passenger aircraft that, of course, also carry cargo, the cargo bay has to be disinfected. And those Chinese officials started to do that. They said, oh yeah, we are going to do that. They came on board and they sprayed something, and it took us a long time to find out what they are using. And we found out, yes, it makes no sense to do it, but it is not aircraft component compatible. So we created something that we call special operations disinfection, which means this is a disinfection method which works, which does not harm to the aircraft and is sufficient for the official request in these terms for the Chinese officials. Works quite well. Next slide, please. Now we are coming to another world. We are walking between disinfection and cleaning. A lot of people do not know the difference. For example, EASA has started to say on the beginning of the pandemic situation, after each flight, the aircraft cabin has to be disinfected. Experts said, oh yeah, blinds were talking about colors. That is something impossible. Disinfection of an aircraft needs at least a whole night stop and 10 to 12 disinfectors, something like that. You cannot do that after each flight, and there is no need. It was a long way to tell them that they should stop and refrain from asking for such things, but nevertheless, we had to have a operational risk evaluation, how we clean our aircrafts, and we found a certain way that I will explain a little bit later. So at least we know, I mean, those men learned in this situation, in this pandemic situation, men learned when you're on the toilet afterwards, wash your hands. That is one of the main issues we learned. Wonderful. On board of an aircraft, it is the same. It has to be clean, but it does not have to be sterile. We are not going to transplant any organs or something like that on our passengers. It's just, we need a basic line, which is for each normal human behavior regularly, no problem to have any germs or something like that. It has to be a certain level. Quite important to know when we talk about what is to be done or what is not to be done. In public areas, you're using so much disinfection solutions at the moment, and you're using them mostly in a wrong way, so that it more or less does not work very well, but it will at least harm to the skin, something like that. Next slide, please. We have, during this Corona ops, we have something we call enhanced cleaning. Usually on board of an aircraft, we perform at the end of the day, we call it night stop cleaning. That is a dedicated cleaning where everything has to be, all surfaces will be cleaned with water and soap. Let's say TenSate-based solutions will be used. Now, since EASA said we have to perform disinfection, we said no, we are not going to disinfect the cabin, but we are going to clean it. And in fact, we are performing some sort of quite deep cleaning after each flight. I've written it here on that slide. And we are also using a certain solution at the moment. You can see it on the right-hand side, AirClean IC240. That's a product we get here in Germany. It is a standard cleaning product, which consists also of disinfection ingredients. This is what we call quaternary ammonium solutions, and is usually used in areas where we behave on food safety, and that's, for example, in the galley. There we use this product since 15 years, and now we extended that. We said we will use this product, which is also approved concerning aircraft component compatibility. We are going to use this product in the whole cabin by now. That's what we are doing right away at the moment, and that works very well. And at least, next slide, please. The request from passengers and of course crew came up to say, oh, we need disinfection for our disinfection fluids for our hands. And that was one of my fights to say, no, what we do need is a sufficient soap to wash our hands with water and soap. That is sufficient, that is very good to use, and it is very common, and that's what we introduced. We had a new soap that we are using since beginning of last year. All ingredients have been checked very, very well, and we refrained from offering sanitizers, disinfection fluids or something like that. It is not needed. And those people who do not know how to use disinfection fluid can't do anything in a wrong matter if we just offer soap. And it works quite well. Of course, we also do have disinfection fluid on board of the aircraft, and that's what we are doing since 1.5 decades, but that's on behalf of food safety. And you can see this little bottle on the right-hand side on the picture. That is what our flight attendants have stored in the galley for the time they are going to perform food handling, they have to wash hands before. Sometimes all lavatories are locked because passengers are there and they can't wash their hands. In the galley itself, there is something like that where you could use water and soap, and that was the reason why they got those disinfection fluids. Those are common fluids, professional fluids, which are also used in hospitals and things like that. Very important to know, whenever using such fluids, you have to have hygiene plans. You have to introduce each employee who is working with that very well. You have to make risk analysis, things like that. That's what we did on behalf of food safety, but of course now also works on behalf of Corona. Yeah. Now, next slide, please. I would like to hand over to Ralf, and he will show you some more preparations we are performing right away for basic hygiene.
Yeah, thanks, Joachim, for this interesting insights from a realistic point, and it shows how far theory and practice are away. And it's good to be prepared, and hopefully for the next time to be better prepared for the next pandemic that for sure will come, but hopefully in a very far time. With the arrival of Corona last year in Europe, Lufthansa Technik came to us and said that they are looking for a technology that helps to support the basic hygiene on board. Next slide, please. Of course, the goal of the airlines is to generate confidence of a safe hygiene environment to regain passengers. And it is Hecosol's credo that many little steps lead to a general improvement of the hygienic conditions. And it is our vision that we have to reduce the concentration of germs on the high-touch surfaces in order to lower the infection risk. Of course, you have to do the general hygiene with the cleaning processes. There should be hand disinfection from the staff and also the passengers. And the antimicrobial coatings or surfaces, they should reduce the average microbiological load during the flight. They should increase the hygiene standard on board, and as such, they should minimize the infection risk. On the next slide, you see how our concept is built up. So on the left side of the graphic, you see what happens in between a cleaning interval. So we see that, well, first of all, cleaning is not always necessarily effective. We see that with each passenger arriving on board, the number of germs will increase. Of course, bacteria as well, they double every 10 minutes. So you get an increase during a flight or during a day of all types of germs, especially of bacteria. And it could happen that from a certain concentration, the infection risk is increased. And then the next cleaning takes place and this game continues each time. So our idea is to implement a technology that permanently reduces the number of germs so that you get an average reduced number of germs during the operation time. And on the next slide, you see that we have developed a product. It's called TiTANO. And this TiTANO coating is eliminating all types of germs. It's not only gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria. You see the single strains here in the first column. We also hit yeast, mold, and we see that we can eliminate viruses on the surface. So with this product, we have very good possibility to administer a coating on all types of surfaces, and you have this permanent germ reduction. On the next slide, you see how the technology is applied. For this purpose, we use an Graco electrosprayer. This instrument is ideal to coat all types of interior surfaces. So you can coat the leather seats as well as the overhead bins, but as well the lavatories. And it is also supportable for all types of materials that are used in the airports. You can imagine that Lufthansa Technik has done a lot of tests for corrosion, for paint change, for mechanical changes. So at the end, TiTANO and its specially for Lufthansa Technik developed product, TiTANO AIR, has achieved the certification to be used in the interior of aircraft. It's a water-based product. The coating is odorless, it's transparent, and more important when we think about the application in seats is that the TiTANO coating is proven to be not cytotoxic, so it will not harm our skin. And in addition, we know that it is at least lasting for 1 year. Next slide, please. So, of course, laboratory tests are a good thing, but it's always better to check how the coating is working in reality. We have done already tests in medical doctor rooms before. We also have published our results. And here, together with the Hamburg Port Health Center, Lufthansa Technik has applied the coating in the lavatory, on the overhead bins and on the tray tables. So we really coated the whole aircraft. And you see that on the most contaminated spot in the aircraft, we achieved a 36% reduction after the coating. On the overhead bins, 82%, and on the tray tables, it was an average 67%. Of course, these tests were done in the way that we have done first sampling before the coating. This is important that you get an idea what is your background. So this is the daily noise of germs, if you want, that you observe on your surfaces. And after the coating, you do further measurements also at the same time points. And what's important, these tests have been done during the holiday time in October last year, so that we had a really high frequency here on board. And you see, overall, we achieve a 65% reduction of the germs in the cabin. Well, on the next slide, and this is the final slide, you see that with our TiTANO technology, and we can not only address surfaces in the interior of an aircraft, but with TiTANO, we can, for example, coat air conditioners, boarding and check-in areas, elevators, toilets, and transport vehicles. So all these places in airports where a lot of people are coming together and are carried through the process. And we should not forget the catering. That's important that we get a healthy meal, but this should not contain any mold. And for that, we have TiOMOULD, where we can easily coat cooling houses and as well the transport vehicles. Yeah, I thank you very much, Max, again for the invitation here to this conference. I like to thank Jerry for the organization, and of course my partner and friend Joachim Klaus from Lufthansa that he was joining me today. And if there are any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. And yeah, please drop your questions into the Q&A. I mean, just very quickly from me, that really interesting, the results you showed there on the germ reduction. And that's if I'm reading it correctly, and I might not be, that duration of time that it lasts is as long as a year.
Yes.
So effective for a whole year. And by germ reduction, that would include viral particles as part of that test?
No, virus particles are normally not measured in simple ways like agar plate testing. Mm-hmm. So here we test for bacteria and for yeast.
Questions coming from David O'Connell. Hi, David, who's asked, do you think that TiTANO could be used for GSE equipment outside the aircraft?
What is GSE?
So ground service equipment. So the pushback tugs and the belt loaders and all of the equipment operating around the aircraft.
I would say yes, definitely.
Yeah, sure. Driver cabin, something like that, you know, on a truck or belt loaders, catering trucks and things like that. You can use it. And not only thinking concerning pandemic situations, we are talking about a basic line of hygiene, which makes it easier to keep surfaces clean. That is the main issue of this solution.
Excellent. And obviously, as you showed on that final slide, Ralph, it's also, you can use this with inside the airport, so check-in counters.
There's so many possibilities of applications.
Quick question, Joachim, before we move on. Why are we so biased towards disinfectants? And I'm guilty of it as well. When this crisis started, the supermarket sold out here of disinfection cleaners. But it does seem like soap and water is very underrated in tackling this pandemic. I'm just interested to get your thoughts on why we reach that conclusion as human beings.
Using all this disinfection is something for professional use. That's what we have to know. You have to know how to use it, what kind of solutions you use, what kind of technique you use. And that is certain different to classic cleaning processes, which are normally absolutely sufficient. Absolutely. Normally, you do not have to talk about disinfection. We are not in a hospital where we have some, let's say, immunosuppressive patients or something like that. We are in our world with all our germs and bacteria and things like that we have around us that does not harm us, only if it rises up to a certain level. For example, we're talking about special incident cleaning. Then we're talking about a disinfector coming on board after having norovirus or something like that, you know. But that's a very special thing, and you always have to think about that. For non-professional use and, for example, at home, things like that, water and soap is the solution. Yeah, that is what I have to say really every time when people come around.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you both very much. And as I said at the outset of the conference, your email addresses are on the slides, and we'll have those on the archive, which we'll be sending around to everybody. If you have any questions, if you want anything you want to check and get some advice on, then do talk to Ralph and to Joachim, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help. But for now, thank you very much. Hopefully you'll be around for the rest of the day. But really enlightening stuff. Thank you both.
Thank you, Max. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.